What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca, back again with episode 72. We're recapping action across the NFL and some breaking news coming on the heels of the Damian Lillard trade last weekend in the NBA. But before we get into it, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. You can get the audio from this episode on Spotify, and let's get into it. Let's rewind a little bit back to Thursday Night Football, where the Detroit Lions made a massive statement on the national stage yet again, beating the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field, just like they did last year in the regular season finale. This wasn't just beating the Green Bay Packers, where they squeaked out against Aaron Rodgers last year. They dominated the Packers. Even though Jared Goff threw an early interception, the defense held tough, forced an early field goal, and then just wreaked havoc on the Packers and really made Jordan Love overthink things, forced the ball, and it generated turnovers, which they immediately cashed in. And honestly, this game felt like it was over by halftime. It was 27-3. Detroit is having all the momentum, and very big shout out to the fan base for traveling. I mean, we saw them take over, maybe not take over, but have a significant presence at Arrowhead. We saw that at Lambeau Field. Very impressive to see that this fan base is getting energized. We haven't seen the Detroit Lions play this well in so long. And this brand of the Detroit Lions is different. They are physical, they are tough, and honestly, even a little gimmicky too, but in the best way possible. We're seeing this physicality brought in by the offensive line. They are paving lanes for David Montgomery, who missed a couple games but is back, and he was extremely physical. I mean, they just stuck with the run, kept running it down, wearing out the Packers defense. Not a lot of yards per carry, but just the amount of carries he got, which was about 28, went over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and replicating what he did in that season opener against the Kansas City Chiefs. And if they can lean on that running game between Montgomery and even Jahmyr Gibbs, who, yes, he'll get some reps for fantasy owners out there. I know it's not looking good right now, but I know that Ben Johnson, their offensive coordinator, will integrate him slowly but surely and get more reps later this year. And regarding this, the whole team, Aiden Hutchinson is building off his very good rookie year. Again, another sack, and if they're having this type of pressure coming off the edge, it's just making life difficult for opposing quarterbacks, especially when David Bakhtiari, who has been probably on the Hall of Fame arc for the Green Bay Packers, he's been missing games, probably not going to be the same guy that he used to be pre-injury, but just his presence out there is big, and Green Bay really missed him out there on Thursday. As the Packers responded in the second half, they were trying to mount a comeback. It was a weird sequence towards the end of the third quarter where they actually had time expired. You saw triple zeros, and the snap still got off about a half second. And you've seen the refs give a little bit of leeway when it's the play clock, but not the game clock. And this was a pretty bad missed call because it turned into a 45-yard gain to Romeo Doubs, which set up a touchdown. The NBA has a shot clock and a buzzer. We hear this all the time when the shot clock goes off or even the game clock goes off to triple zeros. I think the NFL needs to integrate this too, because that would have made it clear play is over, whistling this dead, because usually when the game clock is winding down between the third quarter to the fourth quarter, a lot of teams are just lining up to get a cheap 5 yards to start the next quarter, but most likely they're not running a play. That was a missed call. Thankfully, the Lions didn't have to really pay a big price for it in the long run. They won pretty comfortably, but I think this is again reiterating the fact that the NFL needs to integrate and allocate resources into refereeing, a sky judge, like I said last year when the NFL season was going about, and just giving referees more ability to review things from instant replay to just little things from their penalties, whatever the case may be. Just have replay to its full capacity and help them out so calls like this aren't being blown live. And going back to Detroit, we talked about their physicality, and I was confused in the offseason when they let go of Jamal Williams, but I think what happens is that he played so well and he was just too much for their budget. They just used those dollars for David Montgomery, who is trying to find his way back after falling out of the rotation in Chicago. Coupling that in with Jahmyr Gibbs, it's a nice backfield to go along with this offensive line. This new branded Detroit team is looking very good. We talked about their weapons with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sam Laporta is continuing to bud into a nice young tight end. Josh Reynolds, pretty solid day. And we're still waiting on Jameson Williams to come back from suspension, who was actually reduced after week 4, so he will be coming back sooner than expected. That's great for the Detroit offense. And let's just talk about Jared Goff. He's not as bad as what many people tried to put him out to be. He was the guy that was sent away from LA because he couldn't beat Bill Belichick's defense. How many times has Bill Belichick led defenses destroyed quarterbacks' sanity or just their confidence because he has, as Sam Darnold once said, seeing ghosts out there? Going back to that Super Bowl, they did a good job in handling probably an injured Todd Gurley, and a lot of times it just came down to a few plays. It was a defensive struggle out there. I don't think the whole thing was on Jared Goff. Now that he's in Detroit, he's kind of fallen out of the national media. Detroit's been out of the playoff picture for a while, but now he's on this redemption arc, which we love to see. He has been in command of the offense. He had over 4,000 yards passing, and historically he can hit that mark pretty consistently. He's kept the turnovers down and always never gonna throw the prettiest of ball, but it's usually on time and on point. And that's what we need out of our quarterbacks. The Detroit Lions drafted Hendon Hooker, and we're always thinking that that's the guy that might replace Jared Goff. And he very well might be. But right now, Jared Goff is leading this offense. I honestly think Jared Goff is an upper half type of quarterback. That means he's top 15. And I mean, remember, when he was with the LA Rams, he went head-to-head with Dak Prescott, beat him, and he went head-to-head with Drew Brees on the road and outdueled Drew Brees. I think there's some credit to give to Jared Goff. And if he's continuing to do this, Detroit is not only just going to win the division, but they have a chance to even make some noise if they make the playoffs. The Eagles might be the weirdest 4-0 team I've seen in recent memory, at least since the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers, who went 11-0 and then kind of crashed and burned towards the end of the season. Now, I hope the Eagles don't do that this year, but they definitely have some flaws. The Commanders are coming off a humiliating loss. They lost 37-3 against Buffalo. Sam Howell just didn't look altogether. He took a lot of sacks, had a lot of turnovers, and that was his first true bad game in the NFL. And for a guy that's trying to earn the starting gig long term, he has to respond. And boy, did he respond. First drive, on time, on point, slicing up the Eagles defense, who still has a really good defensive line. And they got in his face pretty often, but still hang tough in the pocket. And honestly, Washington dominated that first half. They were up 17-7. A late field goal helped the Eagles kind of rally and regain the lead in that third quarter. But I really like what I see out of Washington out of 4 games so far this season. That's mainly thanks to Eric Bieniemy, and I think he's really starting to show that he is an offensive guru worthy of being a head coach in this league. He brings a lot of Chiefs concepts, and maybe they're the poor man's Chiefs, so what? They still have some really good weapons. Jahan Dotson, they have scary Terry McLaurin. And Logan Thomas is a pretty good tight end. He got a nice seam catch to set up a touchdown later on in the second quarter. Like I said, really like what I see out of DC. There's new ownership, there's new energy. And yes, they are 2-2, but it's a very competitive division. They're going to be there in the playoff mix, that's for sure. And to go back to the Eagles' struggles, I mean, pass defense looking a little suspect. This experiment with Bradbury in the slot is okay, but it's leaving poor Josh Jobe on an island on the outside. He's getting beaten, not looking so good. Against Sam Howell, he allowed a 97.5 passer rating, a lot of completions. He's going to have to either improve, or I think Sean Desai may have to figure out a way, bench him, slide James Bradbury back outside, and then figure out this whole issue with the nickel corner, because Avonte Maddox is probably done for the year with that pec injury, and that means a lot of slot receivers can maybe go to town on the Eagles defense. So it's really where you're going to stop the bleeding. I probably prefer to go on the outside because that benefits Bradbury's skill sets even more. He's an all-pro corner. He's coming off a really good year last year, and I think he's better off on the outside, and you have to find a way to get a new cornerback in that slot position. Positive sides from this is probably the best game that the Eagles offense has looked, namely Jalen Hurts. A lot of storylines are coming off that he's been struggling, and he hasn't been struggling. He just hasn't looked insane like he did last year. There have been 3 interceptions coming into this game, a lost fumble, and this is the first time we're seeing that Jalen to AJ connection really start to heat up. Last week against the Bucks, it was 9 catches for 130 yards. This time it was 9 catches for 175 yards and 2 big touchdowns. Remember, AJ Brown, his Twitter handle is always open, and quite literally always open. It was an interesting defensive tactic by Jack Del Rio, who I think is a pretty good DC, and also Ron Rivera, but to have the young cornerback Emmanuel Forbes, who is, let's face it, an NFL toothpick, at least he's giving up a good 50 to 60 pounds on AJ Brown, competed to the best of his skill set, and I think he might improve in a second matchup, but the poor kid struggled just trying to stay with AJ Brown. AJ is a big receiver, he's fast, and it's just so hard to guard when you're giving up so much weight. There was a sequence towards the end of the game, and it's tied. Eagles are in field goal range. I think with the best O-line, thing to do would probably just run it with DeAndre Swift or even Jalen Hurts, get into a more comfortable field goal, and just bleed the clock. Walk off. Jake Elliott has been fantastic to start this year, but they went for it all. I like going for touchdowns. Nick Sirianni said, "I'm never going to apologize for scoring a touchdown." I get it. You give a 7-point lead, and you're going to trust your defense to hold up and protect that lead. The defense was good leading up to it, but they were very inconsistent in that first half, and they picked the worst time to be back in that first half form. Yet again, there were a couple times where Sam Howell got loose with his legs or just with his arm. Converted. You're in the red zone. Came down to 2 seconds. Needed a touchdown to tie the game. And they did so. Jahan Dotson. Great job by the Commanders. And I think we're going to really dissect how Ron Rivera didn't elect to go for 2. It's easy to do that with hindsight, but I'm not going to really kill Ron Rivera at that point. Yeah, it's a possibility, but even so, I think the Eagles' defense was pretty worn out, and you take your chances with overtime as well. Nonetheless, the Eagles' defense clamped down when necessary, 3 and out. They get the ball back to the offense. Jalen Hurts engineers a drive to get Jake Elliott in range, walk-off field goal. Eagles go to 4-0. And like I said, they might be a pretty flawed 4-0 team. They're winning ugly. I'm definitely a little concerned just because they've had issues, and I just don't know how long they're going to get away with it. They have to travel next week to LA, pretty good defensive line, and Puka Nacua is a very good slot receiver. He's been basically the Cooper Kupp reincarnated. I think he would have a pretty good day against this pass defense. So hopefully for the Eagles' sake, that D-line gets home. They had 5 sacks, but not a lot of pressure up the middle. Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis were all a little quiet on Sunday. So we need to see them improve. Like to see more of Hassan Reddick. He finally got home, and that's great. We need to see them wreak some havoc against Matthew Stafford and an offense and come away with a victory on the road yet again. The Tush Push, now locally dubbed by Philadelphians as the brotherly shove, has been subject to a lot of criticism in the NFL circles. And as a Philly fan, I personally love it. I mean, I think it's a way to really show off our great offensive line and a quarterback who can squat 600 pounds. We've seen other teams try to do it, and they haven't been able to do it at our success, even at a 92% clip like the Philadelphia Eagles can do it. I think it is something where it is a nuanced play. It's not a nice play. It's like a rugby play, and a lot of players and former coaches and analysts don't really like it. They want to limit it. They want to ban it entirely. They think it's an illegal play. First of all, it's not an illegal play. If you're pulling, yes, 100% illegal, but pushing, 100% legal. And Richard Sherman came up with a pretty good rebuttal to this, where in field goal blocking situations, you can't push onto the long snapper like you do on this tush push situation. And I get it. My rebuttal to that argument is that the long snapper is simply defenseless. He has no way. There's going to be a lot of weight coming down on his shoulder. He's looking down and back at the holder, and there's no way to really protect himself. So I get it. Leaping, I think that's fine. I think maybe the NFL should look into that, because how many ways can you really get around the edge to block a field goal? I think it's either pressure up the nose or just trying to get a really good jump around the corner. And additionally, for all those complaining out there, it's not an aesthetic play. It's not necessarily a football play, but it is legal. And I think for defenses, instead of complaining about it, first find a way to stop it, but also don't allow the Eagles to get into 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 situations, because pretty much 9 times out of 10, as the statistics say, the Eagles are going to get that first down or get that touchdown if it's inside the 1-yard line. Tyreek Hill might be the fastest, best receiver in the NFL, but I think Stefon Diggs really should be in the conversation as well, because in these head-to-head matchups, Stefon Diggs really showed up and showed out against the Miami Dolphins. In a matchup between a team that's coming off a 70-point explosion on an NFL team in the Miami Dolphins, they get back Jalen Waddle too. They are coming in with all the momentum. We still have questions about the Buffalo Bills despite a dominating performance against the Washington Commanders. But something that maybe not many people noticed against Washington was that defense for Buffalo is really elite. We didn't know against Sam Howell how much stock to put into it, because they got pick sixes. They hit Sam Howell a bunch of times, sacked him 9 times. They replicated that on a smaller scale against these Miami Dolphins. They sacked Tua 4 times, they hit him 9 times, and forced an interception off of him. And even forced a fumble off of Raheem Mostert as well. In this game, it was a track meet, back and forth, 14-14. But after that, in that back end of the second quarter, the Bills just forced turnovers. They got stops and went on a run that Miami couldn't quite recover from. And I was a little disappointed coming into this matchup that this game was going to be played in Buffalo in September rather than seeing this in the cold winter of December, and should have been flipped. I really feel that this rivalry game should be Miami in the early part of the year, especially in the heat, and then you get it in Orchard Park in the later part of the year when it's cold. You get the extremes of this outdoor weather. But going to the Miami side of things, definitely disappointing. You're coming off this great performance and you have all the momentum. You had a chance to go to 4-0, force the Bills to drop to 2-2, and you get not only just a 2.5 game lead, but you just keep pace and you're amongst these teams with that number 1 seed. But now that's all down. You're now a wild card team through 4 weeks, still very early, and now you lose that tiebreaker heading into that second matchup against Buffalo. For Tua, he'll get some criticism, and I think he should, because he has to find a way to win in Orchard Park. No matter how hot, how cool, whatever time the game is played in whatever part of the year, he has not won in Orchard Park since joining the Miami Dolphins, and that's something he's going to have to change. In fact, the entire Miami team hasn't won in Buffalo since 2016. You're going to have to win on the road, and now already dropping this matchup, the Bills have the inside track to winning this division. It's going to be an adjustment for sure. There's more matchups to come. The Bills could very well drop a game and Miami regains possession of the AFC East. But until they face each other yet again in Miami later this year, I need to see more from the Miami Dolphins to get them back into that title contending tier. To go back to the Buffalo Bills, if this is the defense that's going to be this physically imposing, and then that we get Josh Allen making such smart decisions with the ball, not being loose, but taking risks, but calculated risks, they could be a top tier team. They could be a Super Bowl contender. Josh Allen may be MVP. they could wreak some havoc. And they still don't have Von Miller back just yet. He'll be back and could be very tenacious yet again. The secondary is getting back and they're rallying behind DeMar Hamlin, which, congratulations, young man. You've returned after literally dying on a football field, so couldn't be happier to see doing the thing that you love the most. One sad part is that Tre'Davious White, unfortunately, looks like he suffered a torn Achilles, and for a guy who's so good and great locker room guy, probably the real core of that secondary, just missing time due to these injuries, it's unfortunate. Probably means, I wouldn't say it's career ending, it's tough to come back just with the amount of lower body injuries that he's sustained, but they do still have Micah Hyde, they do still have Jordan Poyer, who will be back sooner but later. Bills team is talented. They're looking like the best team in football after week 2 onwards, and we'll see what happens later on with the season, but I'm liking this improvement from the Bills. Chicago, they've been kind of the laughing stocks to start off this 2023 season. Each team is 0-3, and they have quarterbacks that are under some scrutiny, some criticism, and you just don't know how it's gonna look. And just like that matchup we saw between the LA Chargers and the Minnesota Vikings last week, it just seemed like no team really wanted to win this game. There's a reason why these teams are winless. They are loose with the ball, they're mistake prone, whatever the case may be. It's sloppy football, and that's how we got here. Chicago looked like the best version of themselves, at least offensively. Justin Fields had 4 touchdowns, 2 to Cole Kmet, 1 to Khalil Herbert, and finally got 1 to DJ Moore, who had his best game as a Bear so far this year. Over 100 yards, a touchdown on that deep pass. This is what the offense should look like with these new improvements. This is the growth that we're hoping for out of Justin Fields. But now, after all that, it just took a couple punts and a very poorly timed fumble by Justin Fields that was scooped and scored for a touchdown to even the game in the 4th quarter. Then after that, you're in plus sign territory. You're actually in the red zone. And Matt Eberflus, who is a defensive-minded head coach, maybe wants to be a little greedy and get that last yard on a 4th and 1, bleed some more clock, maybe even get a touchdown, because that defense is suspect. But why would you put your defense out there maybe to defend a tie rather than just take the lead? And the Denver Broncos took advantage of that. They got a field goal of themselves, and now, Justin, go save us. Justin, you've been not so good, but you're not that your confidence is hanging in the battle. Go save us. And that last drive to save the Bears, moved the ball, but then threw an interception, ended the game, and now you're 0-4. A lot of improvement that you thought was going to happen this season. You're now owning the top 2 picks with the Carolina Panthers for the NFL draft. I don't know. I mean, it could mean with this short week, you could see them drop to 0-5 against the Washington Commanders. And if they do that, I think it might be over for Matt Eberflus. Might have to reset this whole thing. They tried, didn't really work out. And it's tankathon for Caleb Williams. I'm seeing a connection between Marvin Mims and Russell Wilson. As much slack as we're giving Russell Wilson for the bad start to the year and even his last season's play, it's looking a little better. I mean, to rally from 21 points down in the second half, that's good. That builds momentum, that builds confidence. And there's a long way to go. I'm not saying that they're going to be Super Bowl contenders, but it's nice to see a team not struggle and be flat out miserable for the entire year. This is something that they can maybe use to rally, because I don't think they're as bad as the Vegas Raiders or the Chicago Bears. Now, they do have an interesting matchup next week against the New York Jets, who Sean Payton, as you guys know, commented on such a bad job that Nathaniel Hackett did. So maybe there's a chance to back the trash talk, or Nathaniel Hackett could maybe get revenge on his former team with Zach Wilson next week. The Houston Texans, we haven't really covered them too much, but I mean, let's give some credit to Demeco Ryan's and his start as a head coach. Demeco is a former linebacker for the Houston Texans and the Philadelphia Eagles, was part of that great defensive staff who was in San Francisco. He was first under Robert Saleh and then took over as DC. Great defensive mind. In the modern day where defensive-minded head coach maybe are struggling to find head coaching gigs, this guy is different. He's a former player, really knows maybe more modern defensive concepts and also how to deal with a locker room too. You've heard nothing but good things about Demeco Ryan, the player, the person, and the coach. They're off to a good start. You got this new quarterback, CJ Stroud, and he is looking like the rookie of the year, at least on the offensive side. Bryce Young, struggling out of the gate, missed the game. Anthony Richardson, a little all over the place, but mostly good, but also missed a game. CJ Stroud, you know what you're going to get from him. There is these draft scouts that came up with a comparison to him with Jared Goff. Again, a guy who maybe is just another guy. But Jared Goff, like I said, is not as bad as what people make him out to be. I think that's a good comparison. CJ Stroud, you know what's going to happen. He's going to look around and that ball's coming out. First game against the Ravens, that is his NFL debut, and he took a lot of short intermediate passes but didn't turn the ball over, mind you. He had a couple 300-yard passing games, which is something to really take a note of. Beat Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville, who were preseason favorites to win this division. And right now, this whole AFC South is 2-2. It's anyone's division to win. And the Houston Texans as a whole, since losing their quarterback due to suspect behavior, had to reset, shuffled around with head coaches. But now I think they finally got some traction. They made a lot of under-the-radar types of moves, and they're building something slowly but surely. And this connection between CJ Stroud and Nico is really budding. Nico is top 5 in receiving yards in this young NFL season. Looked really good against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who definitely underperformed. I thought this was a great chance to build off of a couple momentous wins. Not enough. I mean, Kenny Pickett is out, might have to miss some time. And again, the offense is not looking so great we think it could be. The Steelers have some work to do, but I really like what I see out of the Houston Texans. So Cincinnati is trying to get back on track after winning Monday night against the LA Rams. Looked like it was very touch and go for Joe Burrow, even to suit up. Played, still didn't look that great, but played, and they won. Finally on the board, 1-2. Maybe the season kicks off from there. You're going against the Tennessee Titans. Always a tough out, but you think you can handle them. They have some recent success against the Tennessee Titans. Not quite. Tennessee blew them out 27-3, and I'm really concerned about this Bengals offense. You're hearing Jamar Chase, he's saying he's always bleeping open. I'm quoting him right there. And Joe Burrow is looking like a statue. He's not a mobile guy, but he's shifty. He can move. That's a part of his game. He is rigid. He is basically now a stationary target. And it's not looking good for Cincinnati. It's a season where you're trying to get back to the AFC Championship game, even break through back to the Super Bowl. You have the whole T. Higgins contract situation looming over their heads. You gave the money to Joe Burrow. Well, obviously very well deserved. You have to work with Jamar Chase eventually and get a contract there. Joe Mixon had to come back and take a pay cut after getting restructured. There is, I wouldn't say turmoil, but there is something amiss in Cincinnati. And now with your franchise quarterback still dinged up, not looking that great even when he's on the field, I think it's really a good decision just to rest him. Just don't let him come back until he's 100%. If this season goes awry, oh well, so be it. But this guy's in it for the long haul. You guys know what happened with Andrew Luck. He played, body broke down, and he was out of the league within 7-8 years. We don't want to see that with Joe Burrow. In fact, we don't want to see that with any young budding quarterback. We want to see them have nice, long, healthy careers, being competitive. And for the Bengals, you're going up against Arizona next week. They're a tough out. But I think with this receiving group, and you get the backup quarterback some reps, I think it's just safer bet. Why put Joe on a plane and maybe get him more injured? You're going to need him, but just give him a week. Maybe he comes back after that. Maybe he doesn't come back for even a little bit longer. Regardless, it's not looking that good for the Cincinnati Bengals. and they need to find a way to keep their franchise guy healthy and afloat for the long haul. I thought going into Sunday Night Football, and the whole time Sunday Night Football has been very mid, to say the least. Like, the matchups have been one-sided and not really entertaining. I mean, last week we saw Raiders and Steelers. I mean, you have that for the classic vibes, but that's not a Sunday night matchup, in my opinion. This time, on paper, coming into the season, this was going to be a juicy matchup, but that unfortunately went away with the Aaron Rodgers injury, and now we got Zach Wilson. We got the Jets with all their drama against the defending champs. And it was looking like a blowout, 17-0 first quarter. Zach Wilson playing skittish yet again. But that Jets defense hung in tough. They forced a couple turnovers. They got a safety. We're seeing baseball scores out there, but nonetheless, the Jets came back and tied the game thanks to defense and Zach Wilson. Yes, he missed some throws. He had a chance to hit Garrett Wilson for a touchdown. But in that second to third quarter, that run, possibly some of the best football we've seen out of Zach Wilson. He's getting so much criticism, but after a while you just feel sorry for the guy, right? I mean, this is like, it's like kicking a dog when they're down. It's just, you're seeing him getting picked up by so many veterans, Allen Lazard, CJ Uzama, Randall Cobb, and they're just nothing but trying to bring this guy up after the entire world, even his own franchise, even his own fan base is ragging on him. And he's taking all that, handling with class. He's showing some growth, some accountability, something we didn't see that in the first 2 years. And I can be sympathetic to that because I'm seeing somebody take accountability. I'm seeing somebody say, yeah, I'm not making those plays, but I'm going to work to get to them. And finally, Nathaniel Hackett also put him in situations to succeed. We saw some bootlegs, some rollouts, and just also Zach making a couple nice throws. I mean, that touchdown pass to get them within 2 was a dime. Probably one of the best throws of his young career. And then he took the next play off a scramble drill to put himself headfirst into the end zone to tie it. That's heart, that's guts. They lost this game. This defense did everything they could to keep us within striking distance for this offense. They got 2 turnovers off of Mahomes, something you don't really see. And yes, Zach had a costly fumble in the fourth quarter. After 7.5 minutes left in the game, they did not touch the ball at all. But that's mainly because Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. He had 3rd and 22 and ran it for a first down. Ran it. 25 yards. He is always pulling the Houdini axe. Running, extending plays with his legs, but not to run forward. He's running laterally, running backwards, whatever which way to throw downfield, because defenders, as great as they are on that Jets defense, can only stick to pass catchers for so long. They forgot that. Mahomes broke their back, broke their hearts time in and time out. The second one was the final nail in the coffin, ran out the clock, and the Chiefs go to 3-1. Jets drop to 1-3. But I think there is some encouraging signs here. The NFL is not about moral victories, but in therapy, I was taught to celebrate small victories. And I think for a guy and a team that's going through such trauma and hardship early, this is something to celebrate as a small victory, because this defense can go against this Mahomes-led offense, force 2 turnovers, get him in the game. You get the best game, except one bad play, really, from Zach Wilson that really cost them the game. This Jets team may not be able to get into the playoffs. I still don't think so, but they will compete on a better half of the basis. Maybe they're not doomed, like I said before, but I think this team may be better than what we thought and maybe scrap into the playoffs. We all know about the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce recent relationship news coming into light. Boy math, girl math. There's a lot of old school men out there who are perhaps getting a little annoyed, a little bothered by this amount of women, females, whatever you want to label it, coming into this most masculine sport that is American football in the NFL. The old times, the guy sits back, he has a beer, gets some snacks, the girl, his significant other, wife, whatever the story may be, is bringing the food. A lot of old mindset there, right? Very traditional. But men don't get frustrated at Swifties coming in and joining in. They are actually making a big deal in the NFL right now. Jersey sales for Travis Kelce skyrocketed to 400%. You're getting a lot of new faces in there. Maybe they're just going there to see a glimpse of Taylor Swift for however long it may be. So what? Is getting eyeballs to NFL. It's getting more attention, more traction. It might be a little overkill. I get it. But use this time to educate these Swifties on the game, because they're going to be curious. They're going to be like, why is Kelce doing that? If they have no idea about football, that is. Be kind. Be nice. Don't mansplain. Just enjoy it as an experience to teach, show somebody something new, and it's something that I think sports always does. It brings people together. Jrue Holiday has been traded to the Boston Celtics, and this is coming on the heels of the Damian Lillard trade that sent him from the Bucks to the Portland Trailblazers, and now the Trailblazers are adding on to their big haul of players and picks from the original Damian Lillard trade. Now, with this deal with the Boston Celtics, they get Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, the 2024 pick from the Golden State Warriors, and the 2029 Boston Celtics unprotected first-round pick. We talked about in the offseason of 2022 how the Celtics lacked an orchestrator of the offense. They tried it with Marcus Smart. He's a little bit too erratic, but he needs to focus on the defensive side as well. So they brought in Malcolm Brogdon, and he was pretty good to start the year. I thought maybe that was a missing piece, but then he got injured, kind of fell out of the rotation, fell out of favor, and now he's been shipped out, and they're bringing in Jrue Holiday, and this is a massive upgrade. You're still getting a highly productive player, and Jrue is a two-way player. He can lock down a lot of good players on the perimeter, and now I think his biggest task with his new team will be guarding the new point guard of his former team in Damian Lillard. Boston and Milwaukee will probably be going head-to-head at some point in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and that could be in the conference finals. We'll see. But these are the two top teams in the Eastern Conference. I think with Philly, what they're doing, and with this James Harden stuff in the air, I'm sure they're going to take a small step back. And I haven't really seen any other team to really take that step to move into this tier. Yes, Miami made the finals, but they were really banking on this Damian Lillard trade. And now they're running it back minus Gabe Vincent and a couple other pieces. So I don't think they're up to the level of the Celtics and Bucks. For Boston, this adds to a really good lineup, because what we're having now, we have Jrue at the 1, probably have Jaylen Brown at the shooting guard position. He is not quite a two-way player, but he's still a very good defender, and coming off his best year offensively, I think he'll build off of that. Jason Tatum. Then you have Porzingis, who can be a great weak side shot blocker and still give you a little bit more offense than what you expected. And then you have Al Horford probably being the center in the middle. Great lineup. I think head-to-head, I still give it to the Milwaukee Bucks, because you give up the defense from Jrue Holiday, but you get so much more offense. And that's going to be a really good matchup to see. Now, remember though, in 2018, Jrue was on the New Orleans Pelicans and Damian Lillard was still on the Portland Trail Blazers, and these two teams went head-to-head. Jrue did a great job locking up Damian Lillard. Now, that is a long time ago. It was just one series, but it's something to watch. Obviously, Jrue being slightly younger, gonna give him a little bit more of an edge in trying to limit the damage that Damian Lillard can do. And Dame has had some injury issues in the last couple of years, but I do expect him to have a pretty healthy season. We'll see 60 to 65 games, and highly productive player, more than what you get on the offensive side with Jrue Holiday. For the Trailblazers, this adds on to what is a great haul for the original trade. I think Robert Williams is a pretty solid rim protector. He just wasn't enough in terms of availability for the Celtics, who have championship aspirations. And then you get Malcolm Brogdon, who I think could also be a trade piece as well, even Robert Williams, but more Malcolm Brogdon, because what he can do is just be that orchestrator. I think maybe he'll at least stay on to start off with the Trailblazers, be a great mentor to Scoot Henderson and then Anthony Simons. it's a good little haul for what you're getting. And I think it's going to really help their rebuild and try to come back, not now, but in 2-3 years' time. We could be talking about the Trailblazers back in the NBA playoffs. And that's all I have for this episode of Spectator Sports. Big shout out to Joy for editing this podcast, and thank you for the new subscribers who've joined us on YouTube. I greatly appreciate you guys subscribing and being a part of this channel's growth. We've had a great month of September with the dawn of the new 2023 NFL season, and I want to keep building on that. So if you can continue to help us out, like the video, subscribe to the channel, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages. We have a playlist with clips from this episode as well. You can get the audio from this on Spotify. Like I said, all links are in the description. Thank you so much. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.